What's up, everyone? This is GoodOlJM. Welcome to the JM Report, episode 17, coming to you from the CSP studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And unfortunately, I'm beginning the show with a sad note, as another legend has passed over last weekend, and there was just so much going on. And when I uploaded my last episode, it was just pretty I guess chaotic is the best way to describe last weekend's events. This one was part of it, unfortunately, as pro wrestling legend Masa Saito passed away on Saturday at the age of 76 after complications from an ongoing battle with Parkinson's disease when he was first diagnosed back in 2000. So for nearly 20 years, this man battled this unfortunate and devastating disease. And I guess, for lack of a better term, or as cliche as it sounds, his former tag team partner, Mr. Fuji, was asking for his friend. Saito was a former Florida NWA heavyweight champion, a World Wrestling Federation tag team champion along with Mr. Fuji 2 times, and also a 2-time IWGP tag team champion and AWA World Heavyweight Champion, where he feuded with Hulk Hogan during that era. His final match came against Scott Norton in 1999, and that was a few months shy of being diagnosed with his Parkinson's. And there's a few notes that I looked up about Saito, and one in particular I actually forgot about. And it just happens. You know these details about someone, and this, for one reason or another, it's kept in the back burner, probably because it wasn't as important, because the man's no longer with us. But Saito came in 7th place during the 1964 Summer Olympics in freestyle wrestling. Pro wrestling wasn't an event during the Olympics, although Kurt Angle might have something to say about that. But anyway, 7th place, that's an amazing accomplishment, especially at a level of the Olympics. Of course, back then times were different, where not too many non-American athletes were portrayed as Olympic hero, for example, like Kurt Angle today. And I know they tried to include that during the Iron Sheik's run when he was part of the Wrestling Olympics as well. And it was just, briefly touched upon either during a promo or an interview. I know if you ask the Iron Sheik now, he'll just talk your ears off about his experience with the Olympics and how much of a better wrestler he is than anyone, because he'll make you humble. Saito also spent time in many territories such as the NWA, the former World Wrestling Federation, All Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and WCW in the early 90s. And after retirement, he remained with New Japan Pro Wrestling and became a commentator. But perhaps one of the better known / infamous stories about Saito is he was with Ken Patera during that McDonald's incident. And for those who don't know or never heard the story, in 1984, Ken Patera and Saito were looking for a place to eat, and they came up to a restaurant, which was McDonald's. Unfortunately, the store was closed, or the restaurant was closed, as McDonald's didn't stay open late as it does now, back in the day. And this unfortunately upset Ken Patera, who was really hungry. I believe they just left a live event, and these guys were looking for food to eat, because big guys need to eat. So in response, Ken Patera allegedly picked up a boulder, as it's been described for many years, picked it up and threw it at the restaurant's window, and basically fled the scene. And this unfortunately led to an investigation. Well, not unfortunate because, first of all, nobody was hurt. It was just property damage. But unfortunately because Patera and Saito had to be questioned. So they were tracked down to their hotel room. And the investigating officers began speaking with them. And the officers went on a description of Ken Patera, and it tracked them down to their hotel room. And while questioning and investigating the officers, they unfortunately got into a bit of a scuffle, and 2 officers were injured. As more responding officers came in, they placed Patera and Saito under arrest and were charged with battery a police officer and served 2 years in prison. It's not something you want on your record of any kind, but these things happened, and thankfully that this was the only serious incident outside of the pro wrestling business that Saito was involved with. And it was also noted during the investigation that Saito was becoming uncooperative, and that's what led into the scuffle, among other verbal exchanges. But my advice there, just speak to the officers, answer their questions. I don't want to jump into another whole topic here, but that is what leads into many unnecessary arrests, or worst case scenarios, people getting hurt, or even a more worse scenario with people losing their lives. Just talk to the officers. You have nothing to lose there other than the time you take to speak with them. But again, this is so unfortunate. I wish I got to see more of Saito's work. I'm aware that a lot of his work is available on the WWE Network through the WCW archives, and he was a big dude. I mean, maybe not big in height, but stature-wise, he's a pretty thick-looking dude. If you guys never seen his work in the ring, I think he was awarded the Best Technical Wrestler Award by the Wrestling Observer back in the 80s. Can't remember the exact year, but I mean, that speaks volumes. And for a long time, and maybe today, the same could be said about the Wrestling Observer newsletter and their awards, as they look into everything, every detail, every aspect, every angle of wrestlers and their work in the ring, their work out of the ring. And to be nominated, let alone to win the Best Technical Wrestler Award, this man was one of the best. So definitely Hall of Fame worthy. Definitely deserves, I should say, recognition for his work in the business. Thankfully, WWE did acknowledge him this week on Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. And wouldn't surprise me if they end up putting together one of those collections about Saito. A lot of it will be World Wrestling Federation footage, WCW footage, and AWA footage. The rest, unfortunately, will probably be available at the New Japan, what's it called? The New Japan World? Their version of the network? I would assume so, because they had a huge tribute for the man after the announcement was made. But personally, I rather not have to come out here and report on someone else that's passed away. But I understand it's life. I understand, these things do happen, whether it's a sickness, a disease, or an accident, basically something that's beyond your control. And we've all been there in our personal lives. We lost loved ones, and this man has many people, many family and friends who are now mourning his loss at the age of 76. And all I got to say to end this portion of the program is, Masa Saito, may you rest in peace, and that you and your tag team partner reunited in a better place. And now we move on to other stories. Let's try to line up the mood here a little bit. and get into this week's news in pro wrestling. Hulk Hogan was reinstated back into the WWE Hall of Fame as of last Sunday, right before the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, which I'll cover later on in the show. And this comes after 3 years of his suspension from the WWE, as Hogan was an ambassador for the company before he was, well, depends who you ask, whether he was terminated or he resigned. Either way, the man was away from the business for 3 years, that is. And we all know the reasons why he was suspended to begin with. And I'm not going to get into it here because, well, to many, it's still offensive and very insulting. So I just rather not reignite that whole subject here and get into another debate about it. And I know I've said my piece with it. And all I got to say is people do deserve at least a second chance at whatever they've done before in the past that got them into the trouble that they're in now in the first place. But apparently WWE has been keeping an eye on Hogan from a distance, as they released a statement shortly after the story broke, again right before Extreme Rules last Sunday. And they say after a 3-year suspension, Hulk Hogan has been reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame. This second chance follows Hogan's numerous public apologies and volunteering to work with young people, where he is helping them learn from his mistake. These efforts led to a recent induction into the Boys and Girls Club America Alumni Hall of Fame, which is true. Many found that move to be surprising, but Hogan, if you've been following him on social media, has been making the rounds. Maybe not much broadcast appearances like on ABC or Good Morning America or NBC, CBS, and what have you. Of course, all of that took place earlier on after the unfortunate story broke of, again, what led to his suspension. But again, really busy on social media. If you follow him, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, he's been really busy. And just unsure the stories about Hulk Hogan flying into Cleveland the day of Extreme Rules. Matter of fact, he flew out there earlier in the day, and that was about 130 miles, give or take, from Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, where Extreme Rules took place. And I just didn't get it. To this day, I don't. Just a couple of reports broke that Hogan's in Cleveland. Like, okay, and that's just a few miles, or not a few, but so and so miles away from tonight's WWE pay-per-view. I'm like, so why didn't he just fly into Pennsylvania, where the event is actually taking place? Unless there's a connection flight, okay, but that was never stated. That was never brought up, unless these stalkers, if you will, just want to point out where Hogan is and make you aware of his current location, because there are people that want to know where. So, like, I don't know if you remember the story about Sasha Banks and how she dreads going through airports because there are too many fans surrounding her. And there was one fan that actually called the airport and pretended to know, told the person that they spoke to at the airport, pretended to be a friend of Sasha Banks and wanted to know the exact gate and terminal and all that of her flight landing, and met her there. And apparently that wasn't the first time that fan did that. So I don't think there was a restraining order issued, but a warning was. So this does put a lot of people on edge. But if this person, I guess the source of this particular part of the story of Hogan landing in Cleveland is one of these stalkers, careful, dude or gal, whoever you are, is not going to always end well if you head to the well one too many times, as the old saying goes. And again, why not just fly into Pennsylvania? But anyway, there was footage filmed during his visit backstage at Extreme Rules as a meeting was called, a mandatory meeting that is, by Vince McMahon for all those part of the pay-per-view. This was where Hogan apologized to everyone publicly, face-to-face, shook hands with everyone, hugged it out with many people. And apparently, all of this was filmed for a future WWE Network special. And it's going to air sometime soon. Obviously, no word on its release date. I'm sure a lot of us will tune in just to see exactly what happened. Hopefully, they won't edit too much. They've been really good with these behind the scenes, at least in recent time, behind the scenes footage taken of people that haven't been in the company for many years and make their return. And you want to get as much footage of them as possible and obviously keep all the good parts. But even sometimes the good parts may or may not reveal something that Vince or WWE don't want you to know. But I hope this is not the case, and that Hogan and with whomever he's interacting with during this shooting film of the special, that we can hear clearly what's being said, that the audio is cranked up just enough, and show that emotion. I know Hogan is a sensitive guy, and there's a lot on the roster now that were affected by what happened, and the right thing to do is to apologize, at least a step in the right direction, and you can allow the healing to begin from there. But in this case, coming from a man that a lot of the people on the roster, if not the majority of them, looked up to, someone like Hulk Hogan, who was basically their wrestling god, so push aside JBL, and either one never expected something like this from him, or let alone let it happen and then years later have him return to apologize for it. Personally, I think it's a step in the right direction, and not many, whether they weren't allowed, was never acknowledged, but I'm pretty sure it was. But many, if not the majority of the superstars and the staff from WWE backstage were unable to express or share this experience on social media. Maybe later on during interviews and podcasts and so forth, but it's interesting that didn't happen. But not everything seemed to be in the up and up. As TMZ spoke to Mark Henry about Hulk Hogan's return to the WWE. Now, first of all, let me just point out that there hasn't been any official word as far as Hulk Hogan signing any kind of contract with the WWE, other than the fact that he was reinstated with the Hall of Fame on its website, basically. And right now, that's what the Hall of Fame is a website, not to tamper or trash on the accomplishment, the honor, and the privilege to be even been inducted at all. But for now, it's just a website. Many Hall of Fames have, of course, statues and memorabilia. Hopefully, there'll be another ideal project in WWE. There was a rumor that in Universal Studios Orlando, that the old NBA restaurant was going to be shut down, and that WWE stepped in and maybe wanted to turn that into the physical Hall of Fame. Obviously, that didn't happen. I think it was renovated into something else, another sports-themed bar, if you will. and restaurant. But hopefully the day will come and put us, pause whatever's going on project-wise and realize, hey, we don't have a physical Hall of Fame yet. Why don't we focus on that? But yes, Mark Henry took to the airwaves and was interviewed, not really interviewed, spoke to TMZ and made a few interesting points here. He says, and I quote, I think it's a good, I'm sorry, let's try that again. I think it's good in a lot of ways because there's always a learnable moment, a teachable moment. It teaches forgiveness and teaches us that we can step up from adversity. It also shows that in a time with so much racial divide with government and different things, different social groups, that there are some people that actually have an infinity and care and want to redeem themselves. I hope that Hulk Hogan, can do that. Henry says the reception for Hulk Hogan with black wrestlers wasn't 100% welcoming. As he was asked by TMZ again, how was that reception among the African American members of the roster of WWE? And Henry would answer with, no, it's 50-50. I've talked to guys that were like, the hell with him. And then I had guys that were like, if Hogan is willing to make a change and try to help out and go speak up and be part of the answer rather than be part of the problem, then it's all good. Mark Henry made no bones about this, and though he didn't express too much of it back then or neither here at this time with TMZ, that it's still a very sore subject. And, it's one of those things where once you hear it, you can't unhear it, unfortunately. And for all we know, Hogan could be apologizing for the rest of his life every time he comes around to the locker room or another meeting. And it's so uncomfortable and awkward in many ways, from Hulk Hogan's point of view. And probably even feels worse for those who were offended from what happened and said. And honestly, I can understand where Mark Henry is coming from, and I don't blame him for that. And of course, this all leads to a lot of internet trolls that just jump to conclusions, that jump to speculations and assumptions that have no proof or evidence to back it up. And this is why I always come on here and say, let's see what happens. And granted, that's relations to storylines and angles and, someone still trying to make up their minds to re-sign with the company or not. I know it's a different examples, but in general, I always like to say, let's see what happens. If me and my ex want to get back together, okay, well, let's see what happens. Well, if I'm going to attend a reunion for, I don't know, high school or college, well, let's see what happens. And especially if you weren't invited yet, let's just see what happens. But for me, that goes across the board. And for some reason, there were those trolls that jumped on Titus O'Neil, and he issued a long statement on his Twitter account explaining what he thought of Hulk Hogan's apologies and where he was, because these trolls assumed that everyone knew what the meeting was going to be about. Rather, other than being mandatory, the meeting was taking place backstage before Extreme Rules went on the air, and it was quite specific that all those involved with the pay-per-view needed to attend. That was the talent, everyone on the roster, men and women. That was the technical crew, the ring crew, the lighting crew, announcers, agents, everyone. So if you didn't see them wrestle on the show, chances are they weren't there. There's a 50-50 chance that they weren't there. And this was the case with Titus O'Neil. And again, How and why that these trolls didn't look into that is beyond me, and just made him look real bad. But Titus O'Neil came under fire from fans during and after Extreme Rules, basically making Titus look like a bad guy as Hulk Hogan arrived backstage. However, Titus was not even scheduled to be there, and he tweets out releasing a statement in response to these claims that he walked out during a talent meeting with Hulk Hogan at Extreme Rules in Pittsburgh. Oh, that's Pittsburgh. I'm sorry. I think I mentioned Philadelphia earlier. I apologize. It was in Pittsburgh, Extreme Rules. So Titus puts out the following. To my gracious fans and the WWE Universe, the reports and rumors concerning my boycotting Extreme Rules in Pittsburgh is false and inaccurate. I was not scheduled to attend or be a part of Extreme Rules, match, or production, and was otherwise not booked for the show. The talent present in Pittsburgh, which I was a part of, was asked to attend a mandatory meeting in which Mr. Terry Bollea addressed everyone and informed the same that he would be reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame. At no point during, after, or otherwise did I make any scene concerning Mr. Bollea's communication to the talent. In addition, let it be known that I did not refuse to shake Mr. Terry Bollea's hand. We did not have any type of one-on-one interaction whatsoever that would or did necessitate any exchange between us individually. As to the reinstatement of Mr. Bollea, I can only communicate that I am a proponent of second and third chances for individuals that show true remorse, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, fulfill their punishment if acceptable, and otherwise put forth sincere efforts to correct the issues. Unfortunately, I must echo the sentiment and dissatisfaction expressed by many of my fellow contemporaries concerning Mr. Bollea's apology and its lack of true contrition, remorse, and a desire to change Mr. Bollea's apology. That he didn't know he was being recorded is not remorse for the hateful and violent utterness he made, which reprised language that has caused violence against blacks and minorities for centuries. I stand firm in the position that Mr. Bollea is entitled to reinstatement. He was and is a role model, hero, and icon to countless people. I hope that Mr. Bollea's missteps in communicating to the WWE in Pittsburgh are not repeated to his fans, and I expect that he shall pursue an agenda that clearly communicates to all third parties that his language was inappropriate, wrong, and should not be tolerated in a civilized and inclusive society. As the father of two young black men, I have spent their entire life and the majority of my adult life with a singular focus, being a role model for my children and young black boys and girls. I take tremendous pride in my charity work and the community outreach programs that I have fostered via the platform I have been given. I teach my sons love and tolerance for everybody, but I also teach them to operate in truth and respect. I hope this clears up any confusion. I, like the New Day, will continue to use the platform to positively affect, entertain, embrace, celebrate, and love people from all backgrounds, both inside and outside of the WWE universe. Sincerely, Titus O'Neil, WWE Superstar. Well, can't get any more clearer and to the point than that. I mean, that, again, it's just unfortunate. Again, I hate to be using that word constantly, especially in today's episode, but that's just how it is. And that we still live in the world where people can't get their facts straight, let alone get facts, period. And you would think it's a little bit easier now with technology and smart devices and search engines and what have you to know how and when somebody, well, not only where they are, but also to get some kind of statement from them. Logically, of course, not everyone would issue a statement via social media and need to share their thoughts and opinions about a certain story. You're not really obligated to do that. But unfortunately, there goes the word again, it's almost expected to. Because why? In this case, why? Because Titus O'Neil is African American, and the fans realized that he wasn't there, or word got out, well, no, Titus walked out of the meeting when Hulk Hogan showed up, or when he started to apologize at the meeting, Titus just got up and walked out. How do you know that? Who the hell told you? Mind you, you have those insiders, the dirt sheets, if you will. And mind you, there are times when they're correct. And, kudos for them, because it's very difficult to have kayfabe anymore, let alone have something not leaked that's going to be, I guess, for storyline purposes, a surprise or something unexpected that's going to be presented on television for the audience. To keep that a secret nowadays, it's very difficult, and they pulled it off. They being WWE, sometimes with the return of the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys, I think the year before that. But even if it's speculated, even if it's a chance, I'll personally go as far as that. But I'll still stick to my guns of let's see what happens, or let's just see or hear what the story is, because as everyone knows, and hopefully you do, there are two sides to a story. We just got Titus O'Neil's side of the story, and it sounds way more accurate and carries a lot more weight than whatever these trolls were trying to prove, that their version of the story was Titus walked out of the meeting because you think he's upset or still holds a grudge against Hogan if he ever did. Let's try to stick to the facts, people. And as much as you want it to be true, you're just gonna, and in this business, and I learned a long time ago that your reputation will carry you and defy you for the rest of your career. So either you start off with someone that's full of it, chances are that's the person you're going to be known as. You can prove yourself all you want, but they're going to question your sources. They're going to question the facts that you claim to be true. And you're just better off doing something on your own and stick to that, because the more you try to sell these stories, maybe not financially, but to make it sound like as if, no, this really happened, folks, because I found out, or I was told, or I said so, it's not going to take you anywhere. In this line of work, when it comes to media, again, your reputation is what defines you more than anything else. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Personally, I didn't really think or give it a timeline, really. I mean, how can you, for Hulk Hogan's return? There was no mention of Hogan during Extreme Rules or on Raw or SmackDown. But the word is out. It was posted on their own website, so it's no secret anymore. It's just I could assume, in a good way, if that makes sense. But I am going to assume that the footage filmed for this network special, whenever it's going to air, will be around the same time Hulk Hogan makes his return. Now, for the record, I have no confirmation on that. I base that on no facts whatsoever. But it's my assumption, because we've seen this before, where someone makes a comeback and is either advertised or has already appeared on television, that there happens to be a upcoming DVD about them, or the best of video or something. In the past recent years, it's always been a special on the network. The Hardys have done it. Kurt Angle has done it. I wonder if Bobby Lashley will do one now that they have, I guess, permission or a working relationship with TNA, and that they could use some of that footage. Maybe even with Bellator. Be interesting, but one can only hope for so much. But that seems to be the norm, or if you will, it's common. Someone has to come back. There needs to be a video to go along with it. And If the Woken documentary, based on the Hardy Boys, is any indication of what's to come for future autobiographies, if you will, then I expect or assume that Hulk Hogan, when it comes to the sit-down interview portion of the special, that Terry Bollea, not Hulk Hogan, is going to be as open as humanly possible. I say that because we have heard Hulk Hogan stories from Hogan himself that have been greatly exaggerated. And I'm not going to get into any of them here. Well, first of all, there's just too many to talk about. But you know, he's lived that Hulk Hogan persona and character for so many years, so many decades. I'm going to believe that even those who know him personally can't tell the difference between Terry and Hulk. I met the man on several occasions, and he's always been Hulk Hogan. And first time I met him was back in 2002 when he and the NWO returned, and they were going into WrestleMania. And this is where the time they just released the new Jack Pacific NWO action figures. Hulk Hogan made an appearance at the Times Square Toys R Us, and I was just blown away knowing that the fact I'm going to meet the man. And there was a special, I guess, VIP meeting with the man, because I was early, and I'll say I wasn't too far from the front of the line. I would say there was a good maybe 40 to 50 people ahead of me, so not too bad. And it was a rainy day. And I also had to catch a flight later that night to go to South America. So all of a sudden we have a representative of Toys R Us come out and reach the back of the line, which was about another 30 to 40 people behind me, and made an announcement that they were going to pass out these tickets or bracelets, I forgot what it was, and that since you guys came here this early, we're going to give you early access to purchase the figures and to meet Hulk Hogan in a private meeting room where you can meet the man, and he can sign it for you. He can sign the figures for you. And at that time, I didn't take a picture with him because I was told throughout that, no, he won't take any pictures. But yeah, people were still taking pictures. So it also appeared in the Hulkster Rules DVD. I kind of make a cameo there. If you look out for the guy in the red Yankees jersey, that's me when I had hair. And I was really excited. But one thing I'll never forget that Hogan said, and this is before what I really got into a workout routine, as I am now heavily into. I walk up and say, "Hey, how you doing? My name is Mike." "Oh, hey, brother Mike. Oh, Big Mike, how you doing? Yeah, check you out." I'm like, really? Looking back, I was skinny, not skinny as a twig, but in comparison to today and my appearance, I guess, yeah, I was like some skinny 20-something-year-old kid. But I guess he meant height-wise, because 5'10", I guess, is pretty tall, and that was an amazing compliment to hear from Hulk Hogan. I mean, who else would say something like that? Of course, there have been many others that would compliment me about my appearance, but Hulk Hogan was the first guy to say something like that, and I carried that for the rest of my days, and it was a tremendous moment for me, and never forget it. So, personally, in the point to all this, I'm glad to see Hulk Hogan back. It's just one step towards redemption. Do you need or do you have to forgive him completely? Well, that's up to you. Has enough time gone by? Again, that's up to you as an individual. Even if let's be honest, you don't have to be African American to be offended by this. Many times we've all encountered real negative comments made from other individuals that, best we could tell, were brought up that way or just don't know any better. And because they see others differently than they are, they feel the need that going to that dark place where they have to insult you by your appearance, your your color, your background, and all the stereotype content that they can come up with. And because Hulk Hogan was and is known as this larger-than-life superhero to many around the world, the majority of his fans were offended by what happened. And recently, again, if you follow him on social media, his new, his beach house out in Orlando seems to be picking up pretty good business as he makes regular appearances there. And matter of fact, I think yesterday he just had a recent one. And this little kid could have been no more than 5 years old, dressed up as Hulk Hogan. He's just walking up to him, posing and everything. Got a mustache and a beard. I think he had a beard on, going the Hollywood Hogan route. And there's Hulk Hogan, all his glory, high-fiving the kid. He's posing with him. And seeing all that, after hearing the announcement of his reinstatement, after going through what he did on this public apology tour, campaign, if you will, after doing what he did or saying what he said to get him on that campaign to begin with, that's a long road. 3 years may not sound like much, but it could be a lifetime knowing that so many were affected by what was said and done after spending 30 plus years as the good guy, or trying to be when you're not NWO for life. But psychologically, I'm sure it affected him. Emotionally, well, we saw him break down during that one, I believe it was a Good Morning America interview he conducted, or was it Nightline? I can't remember which one. But all I can say is to Hulk Hogan, if you're listening, this is your second chance. Take advantage of it, and hopefully something like this never happens again, not only with you, but with anyone. And that those who aren't sure yet can come to terms later on. And they don't have to. I mean, let's be honest again, they don't have to. They can maybe accept and appreciate what's happened as far as apologizing and being reinstated, but deep down, there has to be at least one individual that doesn't feel completely okay with it, and they have that right to feel that way. They have the right to think that way, and even more so have the right to express that if the time should come. Hopefully, anything can be worked out where when it comes to business with WWE, and you have to work with these individuals that aren't too sure about it yet, you can get along enough and still work at least in the business relationship. My only concern here is, then again, this is the WWE we're talking about. My concern is that they do not turn this into a storyline on Raw, SmackDown, or wherever. Don't do that. You're just gonna make things worse, in my opinion, and you gain nothing from this. We've seen this before, other than people finding it entertaining, whether it's I guess for comedic purposes. Okay, fine, and you can have all the excuses in the world you want as far as, it's just like a movie, or it's just like a TV show, and this and that. Well, they just miss the point at times that they're looked at to be more realistic, as quote unquote entertaining as they are. They're seen as more realistic than anything else. Maybe because they're on TV more times than any other TV show or movie that we see all the time. It's just oh man. During the Attitude Era, maybe a little bit after that, I guess the Ruthless Aggression Era, whatever you want to call it, there have been many occasions where a lot of question marks, a lot of head scratchings, a lot of WTF moments have happened. And one day, Vince McMahon himself or anyone involved with creative, I'm sure you listen to Bruce Pritchard, and, it's so entertaining. We Where's the insult? How's it insulting? And we obviously don't think alike, and we're not going to see it from your point of view and vice versa. But there's still a legitimate argument to be made say if your production meeting has a dozen people that find it, oh, that's entertaining, oh, that'd be funny, they'll like it, versus the thousands upon thousands that didn't think the same as you did. There's your argument. If you still don't see it after the fact and after so many years, then there's probably something wrong with them. What 12 people, for example, might think of what's entertaining and funny, a lot more may not feel or think the same way. We've seen it with the Katie Vick situation. We've seen it with the DX and Nation of Domination situation, even though there are the stories of all parties were okay with it. But again, that's just a real small group against the ones that didn't find it as okay. It might have been funny. We might have gotten the point, but in today's society especially, it's very sensitive. It's, in some cases, it's very PC, if you will. Is there a fine line? Is there a gray area? Maybe. I don't know. But it's really, really tough. And even if there's a slight little feeling that it may not go over so well or it may not be even accepted, then just don't go there. I mean, that's just me. I'm not running after next year, a multi-billion-dollar pro wrestling company and say what's good and bad because people don't know what they want. Well, to me, that just says that you have your head up your ass and you're not listening. Once you say the people don't know what they want, then you're not even listening to the people, even though, this is for you, this is for them. Yeah. If that's the case and if that's true, then I would like to see at least once in a while, not all the time, but once in a while, see something swing our way since it's for us, the fans. And to me, that will show that you at least considered some of the things that we're saying, whether in these survey questions that you sent out through emails or the chants in the arena or the backlash through comments on social media. I mean, who really has the time to look through all that unless they're getting paid a lot of good money for it? But I don't see any kind of evidence whatsoever that they even listen. And the logic or the mentality that fans don't know what they want is pretty insulting. But who am I, right? I'm just one voice. And I just ignore those comments. I just ignore that they think they know what's good for us as far as, well, I'm not speaking for everyone, but in general, they think they know what's good for me or for you as part of the WWE universe, of what you'll find entertaining and that they expect you to accept that. No. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is the money. Hate to say it, but it's true. But let's move on here and hope everything works out with Hulk Hogan and the WWE. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com recently interviewed ECW legend Tommy Dreamer. They talked about the WWE offering a lot of money to Dreamer to shut down his operation, that being the House of Hardcore. And Dreamer made the following statement: I learned a lot of lessons in my life. People talk about the greatness of ECW, and it was. But none of us knew that Paul Heyman was in bed with WWE the entire time. I still have those effects and had to live with those effects for a long time. WWE asked me to sign a contract when I went back with the Wyatts. They offered me a lot of money to close the House of Hardcore, and I refused. Why is this? I mean, even before Vince Jr., there were the territory days. And, of course, one may be bigger than the other, and one may revenue more money than the other. Okay, fine. But this notion, and even back then I disagree with it, but there have been companies that had their own owners or promoters just be a part of that sinking ship to no fault of their own. But the fact that WWE is for lack of a better term, just going out there and shutting down any and all possible threats to their well-beings, to their company, to their existence. House of Hardcore has independent shows throughout the tri-state area up in the Northeast, and they may have traveled elsewhere around the country. I'm not too sure, but they're one of many. Ring of Honor, of course, there's ICW, just to name a few. And I question this as to why. Why would you want to shut down potential threats? I mean, are they competition? Well, I guess when it comes to acquiring talents, I guess, yeah, I guess that's where you can see the threat. But it was always my understanding that, say, if a WWE superstar wants to work on a date that doesn't have him booked for a WWE event, but House of Hardcore is open, that they're allowed to, as long as it's not televised, and as long as advertised, and where that WWE doesn't get their portion of, the sale, if you will. And again, I just never understand it. Is a business okay? Well, then pro wrestling's turned into a cutthroat business where they're gonna not only cut you the throat, but probably cut you at the legs, and then throw you in the water where all the fishes are. I mean, good job, and kudos to Tommy Dreamer for refusing. He's just gonna keep doing what he loves doing. And it was great seeing him for that little brief run with the Wyatt family. It seemed like forever ago, but I think just a couple of years ago. And at the end of the day, I mean, what's it going to be? What's more important to you when you're already in the business? Is it your friends that you make, the money that you have, both? There's one way out the other. I just never understand this, and this probably won't be the last we'll hear of this. Maybe not with House of Hardcore, but other companies that are still running out there independently may or may not have been approached by WWE and was offered, hey, we'll give you X amount of money if you shut down right now, and we'll look into your talent roster and maybe, go through them and shift them off to NXT or 205 Live or wherever they want to send them, UK maybe. But it's it just really sucks for all the people that had this happen, had this shut down, and all those people that worked so hard to get to that point where they are now, and not even considered to be picked up by WWE. No, that's a lot of people with. This is similar to the story I had a couple of weeks ago about someone in WWE reaching out to Madison Square Garden and having ROH's show decline. That's taking money off out of your pocket. That's taking food off your table, man. Once you go there, you become the biggest ass in the business if you haven't been already. And that's how I see it. That's how I feel. PW Insider is reporting that Rich Swann was transported to a local hospital in New York City after apparently suffering a bad concussion at Thursday night's MLW Battle Riot event. Swann is scheduled to appear at Impact Wrestling Slammiversary, but right now Impact has stated that they are working on finding a replacement for Swann in case he's not able to compete. There's footage of this online. I didn't get to see it, but at least from the early descriptions that he took a really bad bump leading to his concussion. And here we are about 3 days later. I'm not a doctor, but I would assume that he's conscious and able to respond and interact with doctors and nurses to have a better idea where he is. But I wouldn't risk it personally. I say get well first, get medically cleared first, not only from the New York doctors, but from MLW if they're still involved, and of course Impact Wrestling physicians to get cleared medically. And unfortunately, he may miss out on Slammiversary. That's a day's pay, but your health comes first. WWE.com posted an article about former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez training at the WWE Performance Center. Velasquez was seen at this week's NXT's taping and is the man who dethroned Brock Lesnar for the UFC title back in 2011. Vasquez is considered one of the greatest heavyweights in the history of Ultimate Fighting Championships and trained alongside NXT stars at this week's NXT Performance Center tryouts. Now, is this a sign of things to come? Is Cain Velasquez another one that's going to do the crossover, if you will, from MMA to pro wrestling? I'm a fan of Velasquez. I thought his match with Lesnar was heavy hitting and really spoke volumes that even the biggest monsters can't be slain. And what's the old saying? Send a maniac to catch a maniac, or only a ninja can destroy a ninja. Well, I guess it takes a monster to slay another monster. And Cain is a huge man. Never got to meet him yet, but he's a big dude. And he stepped into the ring this week at the Performance Center to learn techniques under WWE coach Norman Smiley. I'm glad he's still around. And participated in a session of DDP yoga led by Diamond Dallas Page himself. Vasquez was also working out in the weight room and attended this week's NXT taping at Full Sail University. So a lot of questions. If it happens, great. But to what capacity? Who knows? Maybe. If Brock Lesnar is believed to leave WWE and they still want a huge monster attraction such as Cain Velasquez to replace Lesnar in the roster, great. But problem is, Velasquez is going to be green as all hell. And if future ideas are to make him a world champion, that's going to be a while. I mean, don't get me wrong. Cain is tremendously athletic. He's he moves around pretty well for a big man, for a heavyweight. I want to believe it won't take long to transition his style from the MMA cage to a wrestling ring. I mean, if you've never done anything of the sort, somewhere in between, even running a football field or back and forth on a basketball court, or even played a full field soccer, then you're out of your element. And it takes a lot of endurance. It takes a lot of cardio, a lot of leg work to move around on huge fields. But just imagine doing all of that in a 20 by 20 ring and still expect to perform at the highest capacity. And again, this is just a thought of mine. If it happens, great. The visual of Cain Velasquez in a WWE ring and facing whomever, I guess the champion at the time will be when the time is ready, will be a big deal. And seeing that there is some kind of working relationship with the UFC now, not so much that they're doing talent exchanges, but the fact that, okay, this fighter that may or may not be reaching the end of his rope in his MMA career may want to try something else, so send him or her over. We've seen it recently with Ronda Rousey, but I think that was more of a personal choice, not that Ronda is or was getting too old. It was just a matter of like, well, I've accomplished this, now it's time to move on. And no one can take that away from her, especially after being inducted into their Hall of Fame. So it's just another chapter in her life. And again, if the idea is to have Cain Velasquez involved, whether it is NXT or the main roster, but I'll go through NXT first, then great. Can't wait to see this. Dave Meltzer claims that Daniel Bryan has not signed anything and nothing has changed after reports came out before Extreme Rules of Bryan signing a new deal. Fightful.com tweeted otherwise that last Sunday night, claiming that the same source that told them about the Brock Lesnar situation was the same source about Hulk Hogan being reinstated, and also adding that Daniel Bryan re-signed a new deal with WWE. Again, I cannot stress out the fact that I'm always going to say, let's wait and see what happens. Of course, this is a he said, she said situation here. And come September 1st, I believe, is the expiration date on Daniel Bryan's contract. We'll find out then. Okay, we got SummerSlam coming up. There wasn't really nothing accomplished, if you will, at Extreme Rules, which I covered in a bit, about Daniel Bryan and the Bludgeon Brothers and Kane as far as moving forward with any kind of storyline. But this is why Bryan hasn't been involved with any high-profile matches or any kind of title matches in the single capacity. I mean, yeah, he wrestled for the tag titles at Extreme Rules, but I don't think that's what the big plans are for him. It's a slow build. He's still getting back into the flow of things, even though he doesn't look like he missed a beat. But after this week's SmackDown, I want to believe that the idea is to go with what the angle everyone has been waiting to see, and that's Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. Brock Lesnar looks like he will defend the Universal Championship at SummerSlam and is also advertised for post-SummerSlam appearances, including the Monday Night Raw the next night at Barclays Center. So last week it was a big debacle, and that what's Brock Lesnar going to do? What's going to happen with the Universal Championship? What else is going to come out of the UFC deal between Lesnar and Dana White and Vince McMahon? But we had a better clue and a better idea in the early stages of Extreme Rules, so it's a good segue here. But I'll just point out this segment of the event. Kurt Angle was interviewed backstage and was basically asked about the situation of the Universal Championship, and paraphrasing what he said, Lesnar hasn't shown up to work to defend the Universal title, but yet it's okay for him to show up at the UFC event and get in the face of their champion. So I'm going to give Lesnar an ultimatum. Either he shows up on Raw tomorrow night and comes to terms with whichever opponent we place him with in the ring to defend that title, or he would just get stripped of the championship. Plain and simple. Of course, this led to Monday Night Raw this week, and it kicked off the show. And there were at least two occasions that legit Kurt Angle was going to strip Lesnar of the title. But of course, Paul Heyman comes out. No Lesnar. I guess that wasn't part of the deal or the contract, but no Lesnar on Raw. But according to Paul Heyman, as much as he tried to swag things around to Lesnar's favor, and that the idea, according to Heyman, was Lesnar wants to challenge the UFC heavyweight champion as Universal Champion in the near future, and to be basically a double champion in two promotions, kind of like in boxing, but a bit of a different story here. But again, the visual would have been awesome. I said this before, had Ronda Rousey won the women's title against Nia Jax at the time and being inducted into the Hall of Fame, to see her hold up the Hall of Fame trophy. I think they gave her a trophy or a statue, and the Raw women's title at the same time. That would have been a great visual, but who knows if that would have been like a Lunge and Blaze situation. Not that he threw it in the trash, but the fact that you went to your competitor's show or ceremony and you're holding your current employees' titles, or at least one of them. That's probably not. I really like to find out what the ruling is on that. Can you show up on someone else's show or someone else's competitive events and show off your championship belt that you currently hold? I think Triple H did that once, walking out. Well, who was it, Manny Pacquiao or Pacquiao's opponent? I can't remember. This was years ago when he was still champion. But I mean, I think a lot more money needs to be talking than whatever's talking right now to even come close to accomplishing that, considering how things have been running so far, for Lesnar to hold dueling championships from two different promotions. It's not impossible. Let's be honest here. It is not impossible. It's just a matter of ego. And again, money. And again, seeing what kind of effect it would have, not only in the pro wrestling business, but also in the MMA business. So Lesnar's already Universal Champion. Say, for the sake of argument, he goes in a week after SummerSlam into the UFC's pay-per-view for that month and defeats, in this case, Daniel Cormier after retaining the Universal title at SummerSlam. It will be almost expected. It will be almost like, well, it's a no-brainer. He's going to have to come out with two championships, or at least at the post-fight press conference, presenting both championship belts. And yes, there's going to be MMA fighters like, well, one's a real belt, the other one isn't. Well, the argument can be made until the cows come home and vice versa. And doesn't change the fact that it does show your position in the company, it shows your position in the food chain, if you will, as far as WWE is concerned. I know maybe many consider any championship in the WWE or any kind of pro wrestling company as a prop. Even Bret Hart's gone on record and said that. That'll be the last thing I'll consider it or describe the championship belt. I've always looked at it as this is the company having faith in you and seeing that you worked hard, seeing that you've come from basically the bottom of the barrel all the way to where you are now because the fans are supporting you. You're over with the fans. It's showing in merchandise sales. It's showing in the demand for you to make as many appearances as possible, not to overkill it, but just enough. And your reward will be, well, you are now the company's champion. Here's the belt. Well, of course, you got to go through a match, not to be presented like Bischoff did to Triple H. But anyway, I really don't know what to make of any of it other than it's just a storyline. And whomever Lesnar faces at SummerSlam, many are looking for a triple threat between Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, and Roman Reigns. But we'll find out after this week's Raw, as the winner of that match will face Lesnar for the Universal Championship at SummerSlam at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. But for right now, everything is just, well, it's much better than it was, say, about a month ago, not knowing what the hell's going on with Lesnar and the Universal title. But at least in that aspect, they kind of, I guess, trickled into the fans' emotions and gripes and frustrations that, hey, Lesnar's not here. What's going on? Oh, screw Lesnar. Strip him of the title. So I'll give WWE that much. I'll give them that credit just to show that I'm not completely, an a-hole towards them. But when it's obvious and it looks and smells and sounds like it, then just call it what it is. But kudos for whomever was idea to incorporate the, I guess, legitimacy of what's really happening in the real world as how and what the fans look at Brock Lesnar and the Universal title. So SummerSlam can't get here any sooner. So Extreme Rules took place last Sunday night. I thought it was an okay show in general, but many online didn't think so as much, and that's okay. The kickoff match, one of the kickoff matches saw Andrade Cien Almas. I don't think I'm ever going to pronounce that name right. But Cien Almas defeated Sin Cara in a match that wasn't as great as their previous match on SmackDown the previous week, which was very disappointing. There was a botched move by Sin Cara. It looked like he was going to do a top rope head scissor hurricanrana takedown as Almas was standing on the apron. Somehow missed. They made contact, but the head scissor didn't apply correctly, and Almas sold it anyway. So it was almost as if a phantasm hip tossed him off the apron there. But it was still a huge fall, and Almas would end up defeating Sin Cara here. And then we saw in a second kickoff match a 3-on-3 tables match, Sanity taking on New Day. This match, I don't understand why this match could not have been on the main card, but who booked it, right? So it was a great physical match. Everyone pulled out all stops, even, of course, Big E with his now trademark suicide dive through the ropes. And at the end, it took Eric Young to dive off the top rope and drive Kingston through a table that was set up on the outside to win the match. And this is a win that Sanity needed against a big profile tag team or trio, if you will, of New Day to get them back on track, because since it debuted, I mean, I can understand the first night in and cause chaos as, Sanity. I get that. And pretty much beat up the Usos into backstage and haven't been seen from since. I think they tried that number one contenders match, or it would have been included in a tag team match. The Usos did, but where are they now? Pretty much. But Sanity needed this win. The opening match for the main card itself saw the B team of Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel taking on Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt for the Raw Tag Team titles. I was in favor to see the result of this match, and to my surprise and many others, the B Team won and became new Raw Tag Team champions. They've gotten over like Rover, as they say, in a short amount of time. And I shared this on another podcast of the BKC Radio Network that I was concerned after they broke up as the Miztourage. What were they going to do with them? Thankfully, they kept them together. And two, that they were moving forward. And the B Team name was very creative. And even though they call themselves the A Team now, but officially they are the B Team. And they got over with the fans, I think, unexpectedly, at least from a creative standpoint. And they kept it going. Let's see what we got here. And with Curtis Axel having a previous, run of parroting legends of pro wrestling, such as, Axelmania, and then when Damian Sandow was still around, he was what was he? Oh my God, he called himself Macho Mandow. Oh my goodness, that took me a while. Axelmania and Macho Mandow, part of the Meta Powers. They were called the Mega Powers for a week or so, and then I don't know, maybe trademark, brother. And they trademark infringement or something came up, and they tweaked it a little bit and called them the Meta Powers. But it was very entertaining. It gave them something to do, as both guys were, especially Damian Sandow, especially was near the end of his rope in his career with WWE. And it just sucks that once they say, "Oh, we got nothing for you," like, well, writing's on the wall. I might as well start looking for another job elsewhere. But in keeping with that tradition, especially with Axel Rotten, oh my goodness, I'm all over the place today. Curtis Axel, and the fact that he can impersonate other wrestlers, and with Bo Dallas, who's also amazing on his comedic timing and imitating his brother. He's such a spot-on Bray Wyatt when he's wearing that ridiculous beard wig, and he sounds just like him. So for entertaining purposes, yeah, the right move was to keep these guys together and to move forward. And I guess, and I mentioned earlier, kind of like a reward for all your hard work, make them champions. How long? Well, that's up to creative and of course Vince. But this coming week on Monday Night Raw, the rematch will take place between Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, the Woken Warriors, versus the B Team of Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel for the Raw Tag Team titles. Finn Balor defeated Constable Baron Corbin with a small package. We don't see that much nowadays, but this pretty much didn't lead to anything, especially into the next night on Raw. So, okay, Finn Balor, they're playing off the big man versus little man shtick because Big Cass and Daniel Bryan aren't doing it anymore. So now it's here on Raw. So the little man defeats the big man. He gets into a tantrum, and okay, there's no follow-up into Monday Night Raw other than Constable Corbin complaining to Angle about not being considered as part of the two triple threat matches that they had to consider a winner of each match to face each other next week on Raw to determine the number one contender for the Universal title. And Baron, the only complaint Baron came out with at the time was he wasn't considered. Angle told him straight out, I didn't think you were worth it. I think you were considerable. And Angle was right. I would assume that this feud is over between Balor and Corbin and that things move on. But it was just, I just don't like it when they just literally cut the Angles off out of nowhere. I mean, I understand they got to move on to other things and different participants for the next Angle setup, but when it just cuts off in midair like that, and it's not like any of these guys were injured or anything, but it was just cut off. But I may be getting ahead of myself and not seeing what the bigger picture is. So if they, I guess, go back to it this week on Raw, then I was wrong. Next up, we had the SmackDown Women's title as Carmella took on Asuka, and James Ellsworth was suspended over the ring in a shark cage. Yeah, I'm not going to get into any Shark Week jokes. I think they've all been said already. But interesting that the shark cage wasn't hanging as high as expected, rather than just barely over the ring post, and maybe left. I mean, either Asuka or Carmella could have easily reached up and touched the bottom of that cage as it hung there. But obviously, because of that, there weren't any off the top rope maneuvers, and there weren't any suplexes or anything like that. It was just everything grounded. And there were times where Ellsworth was dropping materials for Carmella to use. There was a chain, and then there was that what was that? No, it wasn't hairspray. It was like the OC spray or the mace can that was dropped and wasn't used for that portion of the match. And then somehow, it wasn't shown, but it was mentioned that Ellsworth might have picked the lock and he was trying to climb down, only to get himself hung by his ankle. And he's literally hanging upside down outside the cage. And we all wondered, why the hell is Ellsworth wearing so many bandanas around his legs? Both his legs had multiple, like, Rock and Roll Express type bandanas on his jeans, and it was so strange. I was under the impression that he might have joined a new Rainbow Bright gang, but there he was. And I understand safety comes first, especially nowadays, and that will come to play later in a different match. But unfortunately, the magician revealed the secrets, and that of Ellsworth, while he was hanging upside down, either didn't properly tuck in his shirt or his hoodie that he was wearing, but it showed off the harness that he was meant to attach himself with to hang himself upside down, and it was exposed. And I'm like, did Ellsworth just borrow D'Lo Brown's old chest protector for what? I mean, okay, I get it. Oscar ended up kicking him like a piñata. Maybe that was the purpose, but no, that was his harness. And it kind of took away the illusion of the fact that Ellsworth can hang upside down and only be supported by one of his bandanas. So, of course, Carmella takes advantage of this and throws Asuka headfirst into the hanging steel cage and retains the title. And just ran off and just couldn't care less about James Ellsworth as Asuka came to and continued to beat him up a little more. And that was the end of it. Shinsuke Nakamura and Jeff Hardy for the United States Championship. I think the best way to describe this was a low blow, a bell ring, a Kinshasa, a 3 count, and a new United States champion in Shinsuke Nakamura. What is the deal here? I mean, they eventually had a rematch on SmackDown, and despite having reported back injuries and may request time off again, Jeff Hardy, that might have been part of it. But considering that Hardy didn't take too many high spots, if at all, during the rematch on SmackDown, I guess they toned it down for Hardy's benefit to prevent any further injuries, and in the process, move forward not only with a new feud with for Jeff Hardy, but first making Shinsuke Nakamura the new champion. And during the aftermath, a surprise return after 2 months, Randy Orton gets into the ring, has a stare down with Shinsuke that was already outside of the ring, standing on top of one of the announce tables. Orton then turns his attention to Jeff Hardy, who was barely up on his feet. Orton then takes him back down and then stomps him on his baby maker and then walked away. So we have the returning heel Randy Orton and ignoring for now the United States Championship. And this led to SmackDown. After the rematch, Randy Orton once again attacked Jeff Hardy brutally as Shinsuke stood aside and looked on in shock, as many of us did, as for about 30 seconds, Randy Orton just beat the crap out of Jeff Hardy to a point where Randy would stick his finger into one of the earlobes or one of the the hoops, I guess, if you will. Hardy has these piercings, and he had them extended to actually have ring hoops inside of his ears. I'm not sure what you call it, guys, but sorry. But if you've seen Jeff Hardy, it knows that he has these piercings and he has these earrings, literally, or what do they call them? Ear hoops. But anyway, Orton sticks his finger in there and made it look like as if he was going to literally rip his ear off. And the commentators were funny on this. I'm sorry. Looking back, it was just comical after a few seconds. That, oh my God, it's horrible. Oh, don't do that. Oh, don't the agony and the pain and all this and that. The more they said that, the more the cameraman got closer and closer and closer to this thing, as if it wasn't uncomfortable enough, and that Jeff Hardy's ear was turning white, cutting off all blood flow to that area. And you were so close to thinking that Orton was going to actually do it. He was going to actually rip off Jeff Hardy's ear. He doesn't, of course, as he just throws him over the announce table and then lays him out on the floor with a DDT and just, again, walks away. So the feud moving forward will probably be Randy Orton and Jeff Hardy. And Randy was about to tell Hardy as to, do you want to know why I'm doing this? You want to know why? And I had to rewind because when you thought he was going to give the answer, Randy then just lowered his voice and you couldn't really make it out. So I had to rewind this. Luckily, it was on DVR, and crank up the volume. And basically what Orton says is that, well, you're going to have to wait to find out. So we don't know what the connection is here yet. Hopefully it's pretty unique and creative, because every time Randy Orton has been heel, at least for the past few years, there wasn't any payoff. John Cena and John Cena Sr. kick him in the head. And then what should have been an all-out brawl was like a patty cake match in comparison. And the whole Triple H feud after he RKO's Stephanie and then kisses her in front of him. They have their match at Mania 25. He wins the belt. And an unfortunate, disappointing match. Not the match itself wasn't disappointing, the fact that it was a main event spot, but the audience was already drained out from the Undertaker-Shawn Michaels match. So there weren't too many satisfying payoffs as far as Randy Orton as a heel in the past few years, but that's just me. Hopefully this one proves differently, and that Hardy and Orton can have a hell of a match. Kevin Owens took on Braun Strowman in a steel cage match, and the only way to win was to escape. So why the referee wasn't in the ring, I don't have no clue. Probably for support. So this all led to both men climbing the cage after Kevin Owens handcuffed Braun Strowman on one side of the ring, and Owens, for reasons only known to himself, decided to taunt Strowman while handcuffed and pull out the old DX suck it chop and again provoked Strowman to Superman rip off the handcuffs, the gimmick, and chase Owens, who was already just at the top of the cage but wasn't over it yet. So Strowman, I've never seen such a huge man run, but he ran across the ring, starts climbing up like King Kong on the Empire State Building to get to Kevin Owens. And both men end up literally standing on top of the cage, now that they have that very thin platform there. Strowman is yelling at him, and then commentators kind of gave it away, but like, no, don't do it, no. But you don't know what he was going to do. He could have easily thrown him back in the ring. You ever thought of that? But no. Strowman ends up choke slamming Kevin Owens off the cage through the American announce tables, to my surprise. And as per the rules of this particular cage match, Kevin Owens escaped the cage and wins. In all honesty, Braun Strowman didn't really need this win. He's still the monster in the bank, so that's still going on. And this took out Owens out of action, kayfabe, as he did not appear on Monday Night Raw, and that WWE put out a statement basically saying that he's still dealing with injuries and will return once he's medically cleared. And this goes back to the safety issue that I was referring to earlier with the James Ellsworth situation, showing, unfortunately, the secret was out. The cat was out of the bag, if you will, with the harness being shown. I understand why they did it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not for, blood and guts and bone breaking injuries that, to my sick mind satisfaction that, okay, now get up and do it again. No. I mean, 20 years ago, Mankind, Mick Foley, he did the same stunt with no harness, with no crash pads. It was all legit. It was all man versus gravity. And if that's the idea or if that's the illusion that WWE wants to give today, that in this case Kevin Owens being thrown off the top of the cage, not as high as Hell in a Cell, mind you, but still high enough. That was about maybe 12, 13 feet off the ground. When it comes to the replays, and it's an amazing sight, don't get me wrong, but at least be mindful and careful in choosing the angles of the replays that you end up showing, because they did it also at WrestleMania with Shane McMahon and The Undertaker. But unfortunately, there were just too many shots and too many angles that gave it away. But the crash pad was exposed on one of the replays. And like many fans, I'm sure the young ones too still think that, oh, holy crap, he was thrown off the top of a cage and crashed through a table. He's got to be half dead. Then I saw that one particular angle, I think it was from the opposite side of the ring of the hard camera and a low angle showing the announcing table being broken. And you see at the bottom of the table the crashing pad come through, I guess, the legs of the table or the front flat portion of the table, and you see it give way, the crash pad. and I was having a Facebook Messenger conversation with one of my buddies in Buffalo, and he must have mistakenly thinking that, like, oh no, take out the crash pad next time and have him get legit hurt. No, I got the idea why the pad was there in the first place. Again, it's just safety is number one nowadays, especially. But at the same time, you want to hide that illusion, in a sense, and it's not about soothing some sick mind's ego or anything like that. If it's for entertainment purposes, great. So you won't see the blood squibs or the vest that any action star would wear in a movie when he's being shot. And then from some mistaken in editing, you can see through the button down shirt of the man that was shot, and you see all the blood packs or what have you inside, giving away the illusion. That's just the point I'm trying to make, that they should be careful in the future with the angles that they choose when it comes to the replays and not give that away. Is it difficult? I'm sure it is, but if that's the case, then don't show it. They have to be at least, including the guys on the ground, have to be maybe just under a dozen different camera angles that could shoot that one particular spot. And just don't show the ones that give away the secrets. You know what I mean? But that's just me. Trying to prevent anything from being given away or being too obvious. I understand it's live, but this had nothing to do with the live portion of it. This had to do with the replay of it, because the live portion didn't show that. The replays did. The SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Bludgeon Brothers, took on Team Hell No. Kane was attacked early in the show backstage as Eric Rowan slammed the door onto Kane's ankle. And this turned out to be a legit injury even before this attack, as PWInsider.com indicated that Kane suffered an injury sometime during the course of the last week's episode of SmackDown. And he was then attacked by the Bludgeon Brothers at Extreme Rules, and Kane saw limited action in the match as he wore a walking boot. According to a report as well, a source downplayed the severity of the injury, but he was not seen at last week's SmackDown taping, or being this week's SmackDown taping. So Kane has a legit ankle injury. So much like the Shield reunion, this Team Hell No comeback was short-lived, but didn't matter as the Bludgeon Brothers retained the tag titles against Daniel Bryan and Kane. Bobby Lashley, Roman Reigns had a tremendous match, despite what the the audience thought of it. I thought it was a great powerhouse versus powerhouse match. And Lashley did all he could to put out all of his abilities and skills to the stage. And to many surprise, and me personally, I would have chosen either one, but Bobby Lashley defeated Roman Reigns cleanly in the ring, 1, 2, 3, with a spear. So this storyline wise, this would lead Lashley a claim, whether he wins or not, this week on Raw, for a shot at the Universal title. So hypothetically, Roman wins, moves on to SummerSlam, faces Lesnar 1-on-1. He wins the title. Lesnar does whatever he's going to do the next night on Raw. But Lashley comes out and says, well, I've beaten him before he became Universal Champion. So, I should be up next in line for a title match. So to avoid all that shenanigans and make things more complicated, more than likely they'll have a triple threat at SummerSlam or that Monday night on Raw the night after for the title, and just do away with it and have Lesnar go away to train for his comeback at UFC in January, maybe February. The Raw Women's Champion Alexa Bliss took on Nia Jax in a Extreme Rules match, and wasn't much extreme about it. But Ronda Rousey, who earlier was shown ringside during her quote-unquote suspension, and bought a ticket with her husband to stay at ringside. So it came a point where Mickie James, who accompanied Alexa Bliss, was double-teaming on Natalya, who came out with Nia Jax, beat her down in the corner, and hopping the barricade was Ronda Rousey. She got to attack Mickie James in high heels Mickie James was wearing and threw her against the barricade, slammed her against the apron, and then went after Alexa Bliss. They ran around the ring, and Alexa was trying to jump over the barricade. Ronda caught up with her, and from behind came Mickie James with a kendo stick, and they beat down Ronda Rousey. And then back in the ring, since it's a no DQ match, and it took to the end for everyone to get involved. So between Mickie James and Alexa beat down Nia Jax with a couple of weapons and got the 3 count, and Alexa Bliss retains. So what about the suspension? Well, it was going to be extended the next night on Raw, as Kurt Angle was not approving of Ronda's actions, and that she was just a few days away from being reinstated, and he was going to extend the suspension for another week. This brings up Baron Corbin. Like, what are you talking about? I'm going to call up Stephanie, or I can't find my phone right now, but that suspension should be extended for like another month. So as Baron went out to find his phone, Angle pretty much cut a deal. Like, listen, stay suspended for another week, and if you come back unscathed, then don't get into any trouble and blah, blah, blah. I'll give you a title match at SummerSlam against Alexa Bliss. I wonder what's going to happen. Then we saw WWE Champion AJ Styles defend against Rusev. I thought this was a pretty good match, especially on Rusev's on behalf. I think Rusev looked better here than, I guess, in previous episodes on SmackDown. But I guess when you're given a title match like this, you got to basically pull out all stops. And at the end, it was a mistake made by Aiden English as he removed the turnbuckle pad, exposing the steel underneath. It wasn't the downfall just yet for Rusev, but it led to it. And Styles tried for a Styles Clash, couldn't get it on, and went for the calf crusher on Rusev. And Rusev really did a great job selling that leg. There were a couple of attempts on the calf crusher and other submissions, and it played a huge part where Rusev could not apply the accolade. It was like a one-legged, one-armed accolade attempt, and AJ took advantage of this and would defeat Rusev, leaving an argument between Rusev and Aiden English. Of course, Rusev was not seen on SmackDown this week, but Aiden English was trying to explain himself to Lana backstage and apologizing for his actions. Maybe a breakup's in the works. A feud between Aiden English and Rusev. Maybe it's coming. Yeah, no. Okay. Main event time, as it was for the Intercontinental Championship in a 30-man Iron Man match. Dolph Ziggler defending against Seth Rollins. And where to start? I mean, if you saw this match, you probably know what I'm going to get into now. But the match itself, it was very entertaining. I think it was better than the previous nearly 30-minute match on Raw they had a few weeks ago. And only this time, they were fighting for points. So it took maybe just a few minutes into the match, and Rollins scored the first pinfall. And then it was a score of, what was it, 3-0. And then Drew McIntyre stepped in, causing a DQ, making it 4-0. But Dolph Ziggler capitalized and got a couple of points on the scoreboard himself with a super kick and then a zigzag. And I think there was a roll-up pinfall combination there. So this all led to a 4-4 tie, and the clock made it to 0. So here's the thing. Here's one of the highlights of the match, if not multiple highlights. I don't think it was every single time, but it was the majority. Whenever the clock reached 10 seconds remaining for that minute, the audience just did the Royal Rumble countdown, 10, 9, 8, all the way to 0. And they imitated the buzzer sound. At first, I thought it was hilarious and very creative, as many chants are. But after a while, I was like, okay, guys, that's a bit enough. So much to a point where WWE got upset and they removed the clock from the Titantron and eventually had to put it back on because they needed to show the wrestlers and the referee how much time was left. And not everything could be communicated to the earpiece that the referees wear. But once the clock went back on, the audience went back to their shenanigans countdown mode. And again, towards the end, it did get a little distracting. I didn't find it annoying because I laughed and smiled every time they did it. But it was distracting. And I can understand. This is similar to a beach ball where Cesaro assassinated one back at SummerSlam. And I'm not sure how to take that, where the audience are basically entertaining themselves while causing a distraction from what's being shown on television. So is it a gray area? I mean, you can let me know what you think of this, but eventually Jim Ross wasn't too highly, not too highly, but he wasn't too kindly to these actions of the fans, saying that Pittsburgh, you know better than this. You know better. You are better than this. That these shows are for you. And, it's for entertainment purposes to entertain you. His words. And I also understand where Jim Ross is coming from. But is this Pittsburgh's way of, for testing purposes, hijacking that part of the show to let them know what they thought of the order of the matches, or what they thought of the match themselves, or the angle, the storyline, the participants? I mean, who knows, really? Not that anyone stopped any of the fans that were leaving the arena and asked them, why would you doing that countdown, distracting from what's going on in the ring? But thankfully, between Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler, they kept it very professional and they continued the match, very entertaining. It ended with a 4-4 tie. As Ziggler was leaving the ring, Kurt Angle comes out and says, no, we're doing basically, he didn't say this, but we're basically doing a WrestleMania 12 remake here. So start the match again, and the next fall is the winner and champion. So at this point, after his previous interference, Drew McIntyre was already kicked out by ringside by the referee. So as soon as Seth Rollins got back into the ring and Ziggler got back closer ringside, from behind and through the crowd, out comes McIntyre, attacks Seth Rollins and takes him out. And immediately Ziggler runs back into the ring, covers him, and gets another 3 count and wins the match and retains the title. Well, the belief there is that the referee didn't see that attack, that the bell didn't ring yet. And for all intents and purposes, Ziggler just literally had the quickest match in WWE history. 3-4 seconds, if that, not counting the 3 count. And that was Extreme Rules. And I could see why not many enjoyed it. There were a couple of moments here between a steel cage match and I guess an argument can be made about the chance that the audience did, but I was highly entertained with the Lashley Roman Reigns match. They could have done a lot better with a lot more and better with the both women's championship matches, but What can you do? And I'll end it with this, not related to Extreme Rules, but the Wrestling Observer has reported that former Diva champion Kelly is open to a return to the company of the WWE. Barbara Banks is her real name, and I can't believe she's only 30 years old. I forget how young she was when she first started with WWE ECW. I know she was in her 20s. It just blew my mind when I found out how old she is today at only 30 years old. But Kelly or Barbara Bank was with the WWE from 2006 to 2012. Quite a nice run, and is open for a return. She is currently working on a movie and a new clothing line. She left wrestling and married former NHL player Sheldon Surrey, but the couple separated this past October. She was a regular castmate on the TV show Wags, a reality TV show on the E! Network about wives and girlfriends of sports stars. And since then, Brandy Rose is on another version of that show currently that ran from 2015 to 2017, with her run of the show ending when she got separated. And she also is working on a clothing line. Well, there are a few familiar faces returning to the Mae Young Classic. There was a story from last week, Caitlyn making a comeback. And here we are discussing about Kelly making a comeback, whether it be for an in-ring competitor is anyone's guess. We had Maria come back a couple of years ago with husband Mike Kanellis, and couldn't really fulfill her commitments because she was expecting a baby. And of course, Mike Kanellis was going through his issues, and thankfully has overcome them, as now he's may not be part of the main shows, but he's been working dark matches before and or after Raw. And he looks in great condition. He looks in great shape. And I hope they got something for him in the near future. But it's good to see all these interests in comebacks, whether they're reaching out themselves, WWE, or the individuals open for a comeback. And as far as the women's division is concerned, if the idea is still open that they want to have an all-women's event in the near future, the roster currently is too small for one. You're probably looking at maybe a 2-hour show at best. That's not including promos and interviews and video packages. Because anyone that's been called up from NXT in the past year and a half, 2 years, that's on the main roster now, they can pull off a good 20, 30-minute match. And it's just a question of where we are at that point in time and what the feuds are. But if it means to bring back previous superstars such as Caitlyn or Kelly, for example, to fill in a few spots, to have a 3.5 hour, 4-hour show, then that's great. And of course, that's including this show, this all-women show will more than likely include current members of the NXT roster to again fill in those spots. But I think deals and arrangements can be made where they could reach out not just for former participants and talent, but also like they did with the Cruiserweight Classic and the Mae Young the first time around. They reached out outside the borders of WWE and their developmental companies such as WWN, Evolve, Shine, WXW, and so forth, from around the world to pick up female talent. And that will pose for a great all-women's event. I don't know what they will call it, but I would imagine that all women's championships will be on the line. If there are any spots remaining open or they can't find individual matches or tag team matches for the remaining members, there could be a women's battle royal. There's an alleged, well, not alleged, but Stephanie McMahon is making an appearance on Raw this week. And the alleged story of her major announcement may be, and it's just a rumor, a possible spoiler, that this will be the time that Stephanie McMahon will announce the creation of the new WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. And this is happening on the heels of the second annual Mae Young Classic that's coming up. Now, I don't think that if this were to be true, I don't think the Mae Young Classic will be for the Women's Tag Team Championships, but maybe a second tournament to determine that and to keep some of the participants of the Mae Young Classic after it's over and take part of this created tournament later on. Again, if this is all true, this could lead to multiple events on Raw and SmackDown, maybe leading into Survivor Series or culminating at the Royal Rumble. But from what they have now, and it'll be great timing for this to happen to force Sasha Banks and Bayley to get along again, as dreadful as it is at this point. Why does Angle even care if they get along or not? Just don't book them together. But anyway, but it's all speculated, and this all comes from Becky Lynch's. It was recently at Seattle's Comic-Con, Ace Comic-Con, or Ace-Con, a few weeks ago when she was being part of a Q&A with Shinsuke Nakamura, and one of the fans asked her of any of her ideas or what does she hope to see in the women's division, and that Becky Lynch was the one that for the past couple of years has been putting the idea in people's heads in a good way to come up with women's tag team championships like they did back in the day. I think the Glamour Girls were the last ones to hold the titles back in 87, 88, and they haven't been seen since. And if you want to continue on with this women's movement in the WWE and having this much talent between the two main rosters, and NXT on occasion can have 2 to 3 matches on their weekly show of female wrestlers, then I say, yeah, it's all possible. And I say, go for it. Something like this, honestly, I welcome change, a good change, just to shake things up a little bit and make things more interesting if done all the right way. But we'll find out this Monday night on Raw as to what exactly Stephanie McMahon's announcement is going to be. I'm sure she'll touch base on the whole Brock Lesnar situation and whatever's going on between Angle and Baron Corbin. But I hope this is what's been talked about and discussed lately, and the time is now to introduce the women's tag team titles. And if that's the case, of course, I'll be here next week of the next episode of the JM Report and share that story and where I think it should lead into. With all that said, thank you for joining me here on this very long episode of the JM Report. I want to thank everyone for listening and supporting the show. Have any comments, leave them down below. If you like what you hear, click that subscribe button and click on that like button. Also, you can follow me throughout social media as you check out the description on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat,